Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 35 and it's based on the incredible book Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer. Alright, let's jump right in. Today we're diving into something huge, something really at the core of what makes a nation truly powerful. And the main argument? It's pretty radical. It says a country's destiny, its future as a superpower, isn't really decided on the battlefield or in corporate boardrooms. No, it's forged right inside its classrooms. We're going to explore how education isn't just, a social service or another item on a budget. It's the factory that actually builds the nation. This one idea completely flips the script, doesn't it? It changes the whole game from a simple policy debate to a question of national identity and maybe even survival.
And this quote, this one right here, this is the heart of it all. Education is not just a sector, it is the factory that produces the nation. Just let that sink in for a second. It's not a sector, it's a factory. What does a factory do? It takes in raw materials, in this case, the minds of young people, and it creates a finished product. And what's that product? The nation itself. It means the citizens, the leaders, the thinkers, the innovators. They're all outputs from this one single manufacturing plant. So, the logic is painfully simple, right? If your factory's broken, if the machinery is old and rusty and the workers are just going through the motions, what kind of product are you going to get? It's going to be flawed every single time. But what if that factory is state-of-the-art? What if it's world-class? Well, then the nation it produces can be world-class too. This framework tells us that if a nation has grand ambitions, it has to start by revolutionizing this one single foundational area. Everything else comes after.
Okay, so where do we even begin with something this big? Well, the book argues that to understand where things went wrong, you first have to go back and look at the original vision. And we're not talking about some vague, fuzzy dream here. No, this was a clear, precise blueprint for national greatness drawn up by the country's founder himself, Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
Now, what's fascinating about Jinnah's vision, according to the book, is that it wasn't just about one thing. It was a powerful combination, resting on two huge, inseparable pillars. On one side, you've got character. Think of this as the moral foundation, the very operating system of the nation. This is all about producing honest citizens, people who do the right thing not because they're afraid of getting caught, but because it's who they are. It's about disciplined workers who have pride in what they do and leaders who are genuinely patriotic, not just in it for themselves. That's pillar one. Then on the other side, you have knowledge. This is the engine of progress. This is where you create the scientists who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible, the thinkers and innovators building new industries from scratch, and the brilliant constitutional minds who actually understand and protect the rule of law. And here's the absolute key takeaway from the book's argument. One of these pillars is completely useless without the other. It's like having a super fast car with no steering wheel. You see, all that amazing knowledge, it needs to be guided by strong character. And at the same time, that strong character needs to be empowered by modern knowledge to actually make a difference in the world.
And this next quote, man, it just cuts right through all the noise. No nation can rise without character. That's it. For Jinnah, this was the absolute non-negotiable starting line. Before you can even start a conversation about science or economics or military power, you have to talk about the moral fiber of your people. But why? Why was this so important? Well, think about it. A nation without character just rots from the inside out. Corruption becomes normal. Discipline just vanishes. Patriotism gets replaced by pure self-interest. You could have the most brilliant engineers in the world, the smartest economists you can find, but if they don't have integrity, what happens? They'll build bridges that collapse and create economies that only benefit a tiny few at the top. Character isn't just a nice to have, it is the bedrock. Everything else has to be built on top of it, or the whole thing comes crashing down.
So what's really crucial to get here is that this ideal was all about being forward-looking. It was progressive. This slide puts it perfectly. The vision was for a nation that's powered by modern scientific knowledge and, just as importantly, critical thinking. It was a complete rejection of old, outdated methods and especially rote learning. You know what that is, right? That practice of just memorizing facts and figures without ever really understanding them. It creates people who can spit back information on a test but can't apply it to save their lives. The goal was totally different. It was to create a generation that could analyze problems, create new solutions, innovate, and compete on the world stage. An amazing ideal, right? So, what happened to it? And this is where the story takes a sharp and frankly a pretty painful turn. We go from that brilliant, powerful ideal to the harsh, cold reality of what actually came next. The blueprint was there, the vision was crystal clear, but somewhere down the road, the path was lost. That factory, the one that was supposed to be producing a superpower, started to break down, piece by piece. leading to a system in what can only be described as a state of collapse. So what was the first thing to go? According to the source, it was the very method of learning itself. The system started rewarding simple memorization over any kind of real understanding. Instead of teaching students how to think, the focus became all about teaching them what to repeat on an exam. I mean, this is a huge shift. It basically kills curiosity and critical thinking at the root. You end up with graduates who are great at passing tests, sure, but who really struggle when they face an unstructured, real-world problem that isn't in the textbook. An entire generation, essentially, was trained to follow instructions, not to be the ones who come up with.
And then, things got worse. The very places that were supposed to be sanctuaries for learning, universities, they became political battlegrounds. Campuses that should have been buzzing with debate, research, and new ideas were instead poisoned by partisan politics. Appointments started being made based on who you knew or what your political loyalties were, not on merit. The whole focus shifted from academic excellence to political gamesmanship. And when that happens, you fundamentally compromise the integrity of these vital institutions. How can you have free inquiry when it's conformity that gets rewarded? Well, all of this led to a pretty predictable and sad outcome. The value of education itself just got hollowed out. The goal, for so many, was no longer about gaining actual knowledge or learning a new skill. It just became about getting a piece of paper, a degree that you hoped would get you a job. This created what you'd call a culture of credentialism. The symbol of learning, the degree, became way more important than the learning itself. And that's so dangerous, because it devalues both the degree and the knowledge it's supposed to represent. You end up with a workforce that's all certified, but not necessarily competent.
And this quote, wow, it really captures the devastating conclusion that the source material comes to. The fall of Pakistani society began in the classroom. Just think about that. The argument is that this decline in the classroom didn't just stay in the classroom. Oh no, it spilled out and infected every single part of society. Graduates who didn't have critical thinking skills became bureaucrats who couldn't solve complex national problems. A culture that valued a piece of paper over actual competence meant that important jobs in both the public and private sectors were filled by the wrong people. The lack of that ethical foundation in schools, it showed up as corruption in government and in business. The collapse of education wasn't just an isolated problem. It was the first domino to fall in a much, much broader societal decay. Okay, so let's take a step back and connect all these dots. We've seen the beautiful ideal and we've seen the painful collapse. But why does this matter on a global geopolitical scale? Why isn't fixing education just a social issue, but an issue of national survival? Why is it the absolute precondition for becoming a global power? The answer really is simple. In the 21st century, the most valuable real estate on the planet is the 6 inches between your ears.
And this slide, this lays out the devastating chain reaction, the cascade of consequences. You see how it all connects? A poor education system directly leads to low national productivity because your workforce just isn't skilled or motivated. It completely stifles innovation and technology because people are never taught to think outside the box or challenge the way things are done. And of course, that cripples economic growth. But it goes deeper. The book argues it also weakens social discipline because that shared sense of civic duty and responsibility is never really instilled in people. It fragments the national narrative because you don't have a shared intellectual foundation to build on. And, maybe most importantly, it produces poor quality leadership. When you add all of these failures up, what do you get? A total collapse in your global competitiveness. Every single measure of national power, every single one, flows directly from the quality of what's happening inside those classrooms.
This right here, this really gets to the absolute heart of the entire argument. Superpowers are not built on armies or resources, they are built on minds. You can have the biggest army on Earth, you can be sitting on mountains of natural resources, you can have the most strategic location on the map. But the argument is that, in the long run, none of that matters if you don't have the intellectual capital, the brain power, to use it effectively. A modern superpower is defined by its ability to innovate, to create new technologies, to manage incredibly complex systems, and to lead the world intellectually. And you don't find those things in the ground, and you don't build them in a weapons factory. They are grown, nurtured, and developed in classrooms, in libraries, and in laboratories.
So, all of this brings us to the final part of our deep dive today. And you know what? It's the most hopeful part. Because after seeing the scale of the collapse, you might think the path forward is impossibly complicated. But according to the framework in Mr. Meer's book, the solution isn't about inventing some radical, new, complex theory. Not at all. It's simply about having the courage and the will to return to the blueprint we were given at the very beginning.
And what is that path forward? It's all about getting back to first principles. It's beautifully simple. Step 1, Restore character. This means you have to put ethics, discipline, integrity, and honesty back at the very core of the curriculum, not as an afterthought, not as an optional class, but as a non-negotiable component from the first day a child enters school to the last day they leave university. That's step 1. Then, step 2, revive knowledge. This means a complete and total overhaul. You have to rip out rote learning by the roots and replace it with problem solving, with critical thinking, and with modern, relevant sciences that prepare students for the world of tomorrow, not the world of yesterday. Do you see what this is? It's a direct return to Jinnah's 2 pillars, not as separate ideas, but as one unified, incredibly powerful strategy for national renewal.
You know, maybe the most powerful message in this entire analysis is this. Pakistan doesn't need to go searching for answers in other countries or by copying foreign models. The most potent, the clearest, and the most effective blueprint for becoming a respected, powerful, modern nation was laid out by its very own founder. The design is already there. It's been there since day one, just waiting to be rediscovered, waiting for a generation to recommit to it, and waiting to finally be implemented with the kind of urgency that it has always deserved.
And so we're left with this one final, powerful question. The architectural plans for building a truly great nation were drafted way back in 1947. And they are, when you think about it, elegant in their simplicity and so profound in their wisdom. It's a 2-part instruction. First, build a foundation of unwavering, solid character. And then, on top of that foundation, build a magnificent structure of world-class modern knowledge. The building materials? They're the minds of the nation's youth. The only question that's left, the only one that really matters, is a question of will. Jinnah provided the blueprint. Is Pakistan finally ready to pick up the tools and build?
Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical blueprint for how you could transform an entire nation. It's all based on the book Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer. And the core idea? Well, it suggests we've been looking in all the wrong places. Forget starting with politics or economics. The real revolution, it argues, begins in the class.
So let's just start with this massive question. What does it actually take to build a superpower? I mean, is it all about having a huge army or tons of natural resources? This blueprint says no. It argues for something completely different. It says that true lasting power isn't something you dig out of the ground. It's something you have to carefully cultivate in the minds of your people.
And that brings us to this central concept, the superpower mindset. You know, the whole plan really hinges on this one idea. It's about shifting the focus away from all the external stuff, like shiny new buildings and infrastructure, at least at first. Instead, it's an inside-out job. You focus on building a national character, a specific way of thinking that becomes the engine for everything else. It's this deep belief that a nation's psychology, that's what truly shapes its destiny. Okay, so how in the world do you build a mindset like that? Well, the blueprint doesn't just leave it at theory. It lays out 3 core pillars of education. And I want you to think of them like a 3-legged stool, right? If you take away even one of those legs, the whole thing just collapses. They have to work in perfect harmony, each one making the others stronger. So let's break them down one by one.
The first pillar, and this is the absolute foundation of the whole structure, is ethical education. The argument here is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Before you can even dream of creating brilliant scientists or amazing entrepreneurs, you first have to create good people. It's this idea that character isn't just a nice to have, it's non-negotiable. It's the starting line for everything else that comes after.
And look at how specific these traits are. We're not talking about vague, fuzzy ideas here. The plan calls for an education system that is actively, deliberately designed to build honesty, discipline, and a real sense of responsibility. It's about instilling a powerful work ethic, a sense of national loyalty, and maybe the toughest one of all, the moral courage to stand up and do the right thing, especially when it's hard. You could almost think of these traits as the nation's immune system against things like corruption and apathy.
This quote from the book, man, it just cuts right to the heart of the matter. It highlights a huge danger. See, knowledge without a moral compass doesn't create good citizens. It can create what the author calls educated criminals, people who are smart enough to game the system, to exploit it, instead of building it up. And that's exactly why this blueprint argues that the #1 goal of education has to be developing character.
Now, building on that ethical foundation, we get to the second pillar, intellectual education. But, and this is a huge but, this isn't about what you might think. This isn't about creating students who are just walking encyclopedias, who can just spit back facts and figures. No, this is a full-on attack on the idea of rote memorization. The goal here is to build a nation of actual thinkers, of problem solvers.
So this part is all about teaching kids how to think, not just what to think. It means you're teaching formal logic and reasoning. You're actively encouraging debate in the classroom. You're fostering a scientific temperament, this mindset of curiosity and looking for evidence. The whole point is to completely flip the script on what gets rewarded. You stop giving top marks for memorizing the textbook, and you start rewarding genuine creativity and innovation. Because let's face it, a nation that can't innovate is a nation that's always going to be playing catch.
And that brings us to the third pillar, which is where you put all this to work. It's technical and scientific education. So you've got your ethical foundation, you've got your critical thinking skills. Now what? Well, this is where you channel all of that into building a modern, productive, competitive economy. It's about giving the nation the real, hands-on skills to solve its own problems and, invent its own future.
Just take a look at this list. I mean, it's basically a snapshot of what a 21st century economy needs to thrive. Yeah, you've got the traditional powerhouses like engineers and doctors, of course, but look what's right there alongside them. Data scientists, AI specialists, cybersecurity experts. It also specifically calls out agricultural technologists, which is absolutely vital for food security, and skilled technicians, who are really the backbone of any modern industrial economy. So this isn't just a list of jobs, it's a strategic plan for what your people need to be able to do.
And this quote right here, it just frames the stakes perfectly. Having technical skills isn't just about making money or having a strong economy, it's about national sovereignty. The book makes a powerful point. In today's world, if you're dependent on other countries for your technology, you're in a new kind of colonial relationship. Mastering science isn't just about progress, it's about freedom.
Okay, so we've got the what, right? We have the 3 pillars. But that's the philosophy. The big question is, how do you actually make something this massive happen? Well, this isn't just some daydream. The book provides a very concrete, step-by-step plan for implementation. This is what it calls the Reconstruction Roadmap.
And here it is, the whole 6-step plan. As you can see, it's a complete top-to-bottom strategy. It starts with the absolute basics, the curriculum and the teachers, and it goes all the way up to reforming universities and launching a full-blown national skills revolution. It's comprehensive, to say the least. So let's zoom in on a couple of the most critical steps here.
Now this right here might just be the single most important part of the entire plan. The book is absolutely emphatic about this. Teacher reform is the heart of the system. You can have the most brilliant curriculum in the world, but if the teachers aren't trained, motivated, and respected, it will fail, period. So this means a total overhaul. Modern training methods, hiring based purely on merit, and creating real incentives to attract and keep great teachers.
Step 4 tackles a huge challenge: equalizing education. The current system is described as being deeply fragmented. You've got elite schools, private schools, public schools, religious schools, and they're all kind of creating different classes of citizens with different worldviews. The proposed solution is, frankly, radical. It's a single, unified national curriculum that every single student studies. And it would be based on modern science, ethics, and a shared sense of national identity and pride.
This quote really captures the essence of Step 5 perfectly. Universities are seen as the brain of the nation. And they're not just seen as places to get a degree. They're meant to be the engines of research, of innovation, of new ideas. The plan argues that they absolutely must be freed from political interference and empowered to become globally competitive, world-class centers for research. Because, as the quote says, if the brain is weak, the whole body suffers.
So, as we pull all these pieces together and look at the big picture again, you can see that this isn't really just a plan for better schools. It's a plan to build a better national brain. It's about creating a nation that can think critically, act ethically, and build productively. A nation that is, in the truest sense of the word, the master of its own destiny.
I think the ultimate takeaway from this whole blueprint is a really powerful one. A nation's future isn't decided on battlefields or in the halls of parliament. Not first, anyway. It's forged, quietly, in the minds of its children. It's built day by day, lesson by lesson, in its classrooms, its schools, and its universities. When it comes down to it, the quality of a nation can never, ever rise above the quality of its education.
So, there it is. That's the blueprint. It's clear, it's incredibly ambitious, and right now, it's just an idea on paper. And that leaves us with what is probably the most important and the most difficult question of all. What will it actually take from the leaders, from society, and from every single individual to turn a plan like this into a reality?
All right, today we're digging into something pretty incredible, a truly audacious vision for the future of a nation. And it's all based on the book Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer. Now, this isn't about small tweaks or minor policy changes, no. This is a full-blown blueprint for how Pakistan could, theoretically, transform itself into a global superpower. That's a huge claim, I know, and in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how this vision is pieced together. But before we get into any of the details, let's just start with this one single idea. It's the philosophy that underpins this entire vision. The quote says it all, really. Reform the mind, and the state will reform itself. This is basically the engine of the whole proposal. What it's arguing is that real, lasting change for a country doesn't start with new laws or big infrastructure projects. It starts inside, with a fundamental shift in thinking, in education, really in the intellectual fabric of the people themselves. Just keep this idea in your back pocket, because everything, and I mean everything, we talk about today circles right back to this. So what's the end goal here? We're talking about a complete metamorphosis. The vision is all about bridging this enormous gap from a nation that's facing some pretty serious challenges to one that's actually at the front of the pack in global leadership. The big question we're going to explore is, what's the actual roadmap for a transformation this huge? What are the concrete steps that Meer's blueprint lays out? To really get our heads around it, we've broken it down. We'll kick things off with the high-level superpower blueprint. Then, we're going to dive deep into its three main pillars. The human engine, which is all about people and innovation, the educational foundation, which is, well, the bedrock of everything, and the national character, the ethical framework that's supposed to hold it all together. And then we'll wrap up by coming back to that core theme, reforming the mind. Okay, let's get right into it with this superpower blueprint. We're starting with the 30,000-foot view here. Before we get into the how, let's just get a really clear picture of the what. What does this future Pakistan even look like, according to this vision? This is the whole strategy, at a glance. The really key thing to see here is that these aren't just separate, disconnected goals. They're designed as a deeply interconnected system. One point just flows right into the next. I mean, think about it. For young people to lead global innovation, your universities have to become real centers of research, right? And for that to happen, you need a population that is 100% literate, which of course means education has to be free, modern, and compulsory. And then, holding up all of that progress is this foundation of ethics and discipline, the national character. It's really presented as a complete ecosystem, where every part makes the other parts stronger. So, let's break down that first pillar of the blueprint, the human engine. This is all about people. The core argument here is that a nation's greatest resource isn't its minerals or its money, but the untapped potential of its people, especially its young people. This part of the plan explores how to unlock that potential and turn it into the main driver of the entire country's progress. This is just such a powerful and ambitious place to start. It's not about young people just participating in the global economy or finding a job in it. No, it's about leading it. This means a complete mindset shift from being consumers of other people's technology to becoming the creators and pioneers of the next big thing. It paints a picture of a future where the next big breakthroughs aren't just coming out of Silicon Valley, but maybe from Lahore or Karachi or Islamabad. And, that naturally leads to this massive question. It's a huge undertaking. According to the book's logic, it takes a complete overhaul of the environment that young people grow up and learn in. It's not just about teaching kids how to code. It's about building a culture of curiosity, of critical thinking, of fearless experimentation. It means creating an ecosystem where failure isn't a disaster, it's just a learning opportunity, and where big, ambitious ideas are encouraged, not shot down. And this is the institutional backbone for that whole cultural shift. The vision is crystal clear. Universities can't just be places that repeat existing knowledge anymore. They have to become engines that create new knowledge. That means shifting focus, shifting funding over to research and development, building world-class labs, and bringing in top-tier professors who are active researchers, not just lecturers. The university becomes the hub where all that innovative spirit from the youth gets the tools and the guidance to actually create something real. This slide just perfectly illustrates the huge economic transformation that's at the heart of this whole vision. It's the tangible result of putting innovation first. Shifting from exporting labor to exporting technology, that's the leap from a low-value to a high-value economy. See, exporting labor is basically exporting human time, but exporting technology, patents, software, intellectual property, that's exporting ideas, and ideas have limitless potential. That's the jump from a developing economy to a global powerhouse. Now, all that talk about innovation and high-tech exports, well, it's pretty much impossible without this second pillar, the educational foundation. If people are the engine, then education is the fuel. This next section lays out the absolute non-negotiables for creating that innovative generation we were just talking about. The first goal is stark, it's simple, and it is incredibly ambitious. 100% literacy. Not 90, not 95, but total. This is presented as the absolute baseline. The argument is simple. You can't build a knowledge economy on a foundation of illiteracy. Every single citizen has to have the basic tools to read, to write, and to engage with the modern world. This one number represents a core principle, leaving no one behind. And just think about that for a second. Hitting total literacy isn't just an educational milestone, it's a revolutionary act. Economically, it unlocks the productive potential of the entire population. Socially, it improves health, it reduces inequality, it fosters way more civic engagement. It is arguably the single greatest investment a country can make in its own future, because an educated population is the prerequisite for solving pretty much every other complex problem a nation faces. So how in the world do you achieve 100% literacy and build a modern education system? The vision breaks it down into these three essentials. First, it has to be free. Cost can never be a barrier to knowledge, period. Second, it must be modern. The curriculum has to be relevant to the 21st century, focusing on science, critical thinking, digital skills, not just memorizing facts. And third, it has to be compulsory. Education isn't presented as a choice here, but as a fundamental duty, the state's duty to provide it and the citizen's duty to receive it. These three things have to work together to guarantee that every single child gets access to a high-quality, relevant education. But this vision argues that a nation is more than just its economy or a collection of smart people. A real superpower needs a soul, right? A guiding ethos. And that brings us to the third pillar, the national character, which dives into the more abstract, but you could argue the most important element of this whole transformation. This is such a fascinating concept. It's about intentionally cultivating a set of values, specifically ethics and discipline, and embedding them so deep into the culture that they just become part of the national identity. It's about building a society where integrity, responsibility, a strong work ethic, these things aren't just admired, they're the expected norm for everybody, from the top of the government all the way down to everyday citizens. So let's define this a bit more clearly, at least in the context of this framework. National character here isn't about some vague patriotism. It's a practical, shared foundation. It's like the invisible software that runs on the hardware of the state. It's what makes sure that all those brilliant scientists and innovators we're creating are using their skills for the collective good. It's what ensures that contracts are honored, that institutions are trusted, and that society just functions with a high degree of purpose. And this is a really important question to ask ourselves. The book's vision puts this abstract idea on the same level as concrete things like literacy rates and technology exports. So why? Well, the implicit argument is that without a strong ethical foundation, all the other achievements are basically built on sand. A nation of brilliant minds without discipline can easily descend into chaos. A wealthy nation without ethics can become hollow and corrupt. The national character is the glue that holds all the other pieces together and gives them a real, noble purpose. And this brings us right back to where we started, full circle. We've looked at the pillars of human potential, education, and national character. Now let's go back to that core philosophy that ties everything we've talked about together. This is the ultimate thesis of the entire vision. Here we are again, back at this powerful idea from the beginning. But now after seeing the whole blueprint, this quote should have even more weight, right? Reforming the mind isn't just some feel-good slogan, it is the strategic starting point. It means reforming the educational system, fostering a culture of critical thinking, instilling values of discipline and ethics. The book's argument is that if you get this one part right, the reformation of the state, its economy, its institutions, its global standing, all of that will follow as a natural, almost inevitable consequence. This phrase, from the source material, just perfectly captures how important education is in this vision. It's not just another sector of the economy or some social service. No, it's portrayed as the single most powerful tool for shaping the future. Education determines who you become as a person, and when you put that all together, it determines what your nation becomes. It builds the leaders, the institutions, the economies. In this worldview, education isn't just part of the plan. Education is the plan. And this is really the final takeaway. If you were to boil down this entire ambitious, complex vision into a single call to action, this would be it. It's direct, it's unambiguous, and it places all of the responsibility and all of the opportunity on transforming the education system. It's the beginning and the end of the entire strategy. And so we end on this final provocative thought. We've just laid out a grand, audacious vision from the source material. We've seen the blueprint, but a blueprint is just a plan on paper. This final question leaves us to think about the most critical step of all, the beginning. How does a society of millions of people actually start a journey as profound as we're forming its own collective mind? It's a monumental question. And according to this vision, finding the answer to that